Let's focus on East Africa collectively as a region. Industry captains over here have expressed their confidence in the incoming East African Community Secretary General, Dr. Peter Mathuki. They want the Kenyan national to put in place policy mechanisms that will spur the growth of intra-EAC trade to make it over 30% of the total volume. Dr. Mathuki begins his term in office at the bloc's headquarters in Arusha, Tanzania, as the 6th Secretary General of the EAC trade bloc. He takes over from Ambassador Liberat Mfumukeko from Burundi, whose 5-year non-renewable term just came to a close. Until his appointment as a new EAC boss during the February 27th Summit of Heads of State, Dr. Mathuki was Executive Director of the East African Business Council. All right then, so we know exactly who's now in charge of the East African Community Trade Bloc, but what exactly is on his agenda? Let's find out. Dr. Mathuki joins us now live from Arusha, Tanzania. So, Dr. Mathuki, good to have you on the program. Before this appointment, every time we spoke, it was in your capacity as a CEO of the East African Business Council. But now you're on the other side of the fence. What's your top priority?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me this evening. And indeed, it's my first day in office today. And it's also the Union Day in the United Republic of Tanzania. So we wish them, best in the Union Day. They reminds us of the need to strengthen our integration. But coming to your question, it's very important that we know the region is being adversely affected by the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. So I think it's important that we see how to collectively, in a very coordinated manner as a region, to respond to COVID-19 and see how we can help economies of our partner states in the EAC recover and get into business. I think it's important that we consult with other partner states and come out with an approach that will be comfortable with other partner states, but all get towards a quick recovery for our economies and, of course, the health affecting people. Secondly, it's important that we look at how do we have a very systematic support for businesses, particularly the SMEs, so that they don't get completely off the radar and get into running into businesses. So support and economic recovery, not only generally, but also specific to SMEs. This is very important, particularly the cross-border traders who have been unable now to move from one side to the other because of the cross-border restrictions and so forth when you come to movement of goods.
I'm sure we'll get to the taxes bit in just a moment. But when it comes to the common external tariff, because that seems like one place where we could use an agreed-to tax policy to spur regional trade, where does the CET come in as a means of spurring that regional trade that you're talking about?
And that was my next point. I was saying it's important that we see how common external tariff we could be expedited and finalize it, possibly by close of this year. I think this is something that businesses and even partner states are keen to finalize. And that is again on top in the list that we need to now bring together other partner states, but also businesses to ensure that, yes, we finalize this. And there's a way of promoting the regional or local, for that matter, industries within East Africa.
Okay, so the CFTA, of course, is also a key story as far as Africa is concerned this particular year. But we continue to see wrangles, even within the EAC trade bloc itself, between, say, Kenya and Uganda. There have been a huge argument there about daily imports from Uganda across the border into Kenya. But if countries are still wrangling over simple things like this, how can the CFTA feasibly work?
It will work because we have to approach the CFTA within the framework of the East African community. And for that matter, it's important that we put some very basics in place. And some of these basics are to do with the standards. Because again, we have common standards within the region and standards that are acceptable across. And these are systems we want to put in place. And again, it's important that we create more awareness on the bigger picture on CFTA and what benefits are likely to come from CFTA, and see how each one of the, everyone within the region can benefit and of course try to build more capacities within our partner states so that we don't get into some of the things of push and pull that may not have a very long-term, economic impact. So I think it's about putting systems in place that supports very common standards within the region.
Well, standards are certainly one side of the equation, but given how long it took to actually have this row between Kenya and Uganda sorted out, and it was sorted out more or less at a government-to-government level, do you think there's a need to improve dispute resolution mechanisms within the EAC bloc as well?
Yeah. Already we have what we call the trade disputes remedy committees in place, and that is something that has not really been naturalized so far. And this is very important. That's why you see now partner states are resorting to bilateral engagements, which is also fine because that is within the framework of the East African community. In fact, when you look at the treaty establishing the East African community, it talks of this kind of engagement where partner states, for one reason or the other, they could engage and see how to resolve some of these things. But importantly, we need to have a mechanism, and that mechanism is a trade disputes resolution, committees that we need now to have them in place and functioning, and also make sure that businesses and citizens have confidence in these mechanisms, so that when disputes arise, we can easily resolve them without necessarily having to take so long without being resolved. But again, for whatever disputes that are happening, the East African community as a secretariat is a key to ensure that they are at the center of it, so that they can become now the factor that brings all these factors together, and make sure that we use the expertise that we have, we use the technology that we have to ensure these disputes are resolved.
All right.
But
one last question for you, Dr. Mathuki, very, very quickly. Public finances across the trade bloc, of course, as you mentioned earlier, have been battered by the COVID-19 pandemic, and governments here are fairly keen on raising taxes as one way of bridging their fiscal deficits. But given the things that you've mentioned, you need to spur SME growth, you need to spur regional trade as well. Are there specific tax policies that you're lobbying for now that we're essentially in budget season in Dar, in Kampala, in Nairobi, and in Kigali?
Yeah, one of the things we've been advocating for, and I think this is an opportune time to see how it can work, is avoidance of double taxation. And this avoidance of double taxation, if it can be applied across all the partner states, that is going to ease the cost of doing business. And two, it will also be able to support to ensure that the prices are not so high. And that is something we want to push, so that we create more awareness to some of the partner states that are yet to ratify, but make sure that we all ratify and make sure that we move in the same direction. But again, the CET comes under this, and this is something that I spoken earlier. But again, ensuring that the spread of the tax base, so that is across almost sectors, so that we don't overtax some of the sectors. But finally, make sure that whatever policy that we put, we protect the SMEs, because SMEs, of course, cover a big chunk of our economies in the region.
Indeed, they do account for the bulk of employment and job creation. Dr. Peter Mathuki, on your first day in office as Secretary General of the East African Community, thank you very much for your time.